Hello, Whiskey Wednesday, and welcome to this what's going to be a rather unusual video, because it's a brand that famously I wasn't very complimentary of, but it's something which has been growing in my perceptions in big ways. This is a Fettercairn. It's an independently bottled 24-year-old Fettercairn. It's from June 1997, bottled April of this year, and it's got 275 bottles from the cask. It's 53.6% ABV, just under a quarter of a century old. Bottled by Loch Fyne, part of their finest range. These really like chunky bottles. Comes in like a little tin. The fun thing with this, it's a Sauternes barrel. Full maturation in Sauternes. And Fettercairn in itself is such a light, delicate spirit, which in the past used to have connotations of being like weirdly savoury and a little bit more unusual. Independent bottles always shone through. And when I heard about this, I was just very intrigued by it. So Loch Fyne are kind of a sister company for the company that I work for. And I was curious about it, and John, who owns Loch Fyne, just said, just open it, tell us what you think. So I'm intrigued. And they've bottled a Bunnahabhain in this range before. They've done a 45-year-old Invergordon. They've done a 20-year-old Glengoyne. There's like Springbanks and stuff coming through, so quite fun stuff. But as soon as I saw the Sauternes thing, I was quite interested, because for those of you that may not know, Fettercairn as a distillery is weirdly unique. And I feel that some of the bottles that have been bottled by them officially in the last couple of years were really good. I know the 16-year-old got mixed reviews. I know Roy at Aquavitae really didn't enjoy it. I thought it was perfectly nice and a great whiskey that would maybe reintroduce Fettercairn to people. Sorry for the snoring, the dog is like asleep just here. She's angry because I had to shout at her to be quiet. There's the snore. Excuse me. And then outside of that, we've had these warehouse releases. Warehouse 2, batch 1, 2 and 3. I've owned 2 and 3. Really, really nice styles. I haven't reviewed 3 yet, but 1 used some rye casks, 2 also used some rye casks, and then 3 has used rum and French red wine casks, along with bourbon casks in all 3 of them. And I tried them all. Very interesting. About £55 a bottle. Higher strength, natural colour. Really cool, right? The way to appeal to people. And then this thing launched, and I was just a bit baffled. So it's been in the glass for about sort of half an hour. I'm trying to get my head out of the way so it can focus. It is coated in the glass really nicely, but the light in this room at this time of day just isn't particularly complimentary. This retails for £185 a bottle, 24 years old, weird cask finish. To the grand world of whiskey, it's a relatively unknown distillery, which is quite hard to do these days, really, when you think about the amount of whiskey and how hot whiskey is as a topic. But nonetheless, it's here. So I can smell it already. It's a particularly fragrant style, but let's give it a smell. So apologies for the sniff then. COVID's still having like weird effects on my throat, like I'm getting kind of clogged. You don't need to know that. The nose is this beautiful aroma of like passion fruit and guava. Like all the mango, I can get kind of dry peach skin. On the nose, there's interestingly quite like a nice candle waxy element to it. I'm not saying it's directly like Clynelish, but it does smell a bit like Clynelish. At this strength too of 53.6%, it almost has that kind of green peppercorn, kind of, I call it Highland spice, but that waxy Highland spice thing that Clynelish is ever so famous for. Quite lemony too. This isn't particularly citrusy, it's more of that exotic fruit profile, but it is dipping its toe into there. As I look out the window, it's like 21 degrees in Manchester right now, and there's not a cloud in the sky. So kind of looking at that with this is quite nice. There is a darker profile to the back of it that almost reminds me of like chocolate truffles, you know, the ones that kind of get rolled in cocoa powder. And like praline too, a kind of like smoother, creamier chocolate. But dark chocolate as a whole, that's an ice cream then. Hopefully the mic doesn't pick that up. But with that, with the truffle thing, with the praline thing, there's always an association with nuts. And I've just been, in the last couple of days, roasting off some hazelnuts to put into a bottle of bourbon to make like a hazelnut influenced bourbon. And there is like a hazelnutty, almond, not peanutty, it's not salty at all, but like a warming, dry nuttiness to it that's also backed up with a slight licoricey note as well. I have got licorice as a note before from regular bottles of Fettercairn, some of those batch releases in particular. Yeah, fruity, rich. The lead thing on the nose, which I can still smell now, is just like passion fruit, guava, mango, lime, a little bit of pineapple. It's almost like caramelized pineapple. Bit richer, the kind of melding of those exotic fruits with these dark chocolate notes. You know, caramelized, a bit heavier, a bit more intense, and then the licorice is just lingering in the back. Let's taste it. As I process those flavours, I can't remember if I've said this or not already, but Fettercairn is such a unique distillery in the sense that the way they distill a product is one of the most unique distilling processes that I've ever come across. Certainly in whiskey, it's definitely the most unique still type in Scotch whiskey. We talk about Linkwood, it has that big swan neck still. Glenmorangy's got the tallest stills, Jura have the second tallest. Lagavulin stills and Macallan stills and Balblair stills are really sort of short and wide and fat. Fettercairn still is quite unusual in the sense that if you look at a regular bottle of new Fettercairn, it has this kind of line, like this kind of outcrop in the top of the neck. That represents the still itself, and the lines running down it represent this quite unique feature, because on the still itself it has a water ring. I always call it a water jacket, that's not the correct term, but it has a water ring, and when the still is active and it's distilling, this ring activates as the still is hot, and it turns the copper into this almost like malachite looking colour. As a result of that, because it's cooling about maybe this much of the still, that's cooling the air around it, you create a small vacuum, you get reflux, the distillate within inside the still kind of falls back down, gets redistilled, all within one still. So it's not like some sort of unusual form of triple distillation or anything like that, it's just happening within one still, which is double distilled as a process. You know, think about Glenmorangy, really tall stills, they're like 16 feet high. Those are expensive. Copper is extremely expensive, even before the world that we currently live in. So I think that's quite an ingenious way to get around creating a lighter spirit without spending a fortune making a still just taller for the sake of making it taller. You know, the only people who have more unusual stills are Loch Lomond, who have 4 types of still and put everything through them. Very fun, very experimental. But it's nice that Fettercairn are putting themselves out there a little bit. This single cask is quite coincidental, and I've also never been a massive fan of Sauternes casks, because Glenmorangy Nectador has only been the one that I've tried. It's okay, I didn't rate it, I preferred the Quinta Reuben in a big way. The taste on this, the initial spice and the oak influence is quite interesting. It sits very low in the tongue, considering it's a light spirit. The barrel influence has made this a particularly dense style, and it really wants to like well up around the kind of the pool underneath your tongue. Within that, we've got this licorice note, makes itself much more present, barrel spice, a little bit of black pepper, and just these kind of little jewels of flavour which come from the passion fruit, the lime. There's almost like a coconutty note to it. I'm still tasting that now. The finish isn't particularly long. It's kind of like a medium finish, and I call it medium light because after you've actually swallowed it, all of these flavours seem to like come up into your other sensory parts, like they get into your nose, and you can just smell like coconut and passion fruit, a little bit of caramel. It's not a kind of toffee caramelly kind of whiskey, it is more exotic fruit with really nice spicy notes to it. She's still moaning. I think if you're into Glenmorangie, or spirit styles that are quite light, I don't think Glenmorangie offers anything anymore which is that interesting. Not to be offensive to Glenmorangie fans. They did a lot. They're an industry stalwart, but the stuff they're doing at the minute seems to be marketing for the sake of marketing rather than whiskey for the sake of good whiskey. That's a personal opinion. Same with other lighter styles, Jura, Tamnavulin, which Jura and Tamnavulin are owned by the same company which own Fettercairn. It's the company that owns Dalmore. Glenfiddich, I'm not too interested in this new orchid thing they've brought out. It's like a Somerset brandy cask finish or something. It's not expensive, just don't have a particular interest in it. Whereas Fettercairn with these cool new releases, it's like, oh, these guys are trying. And they might not be directly listening to folk like me and viewers like you, but they're going, well, people want cool casks that maybe they've not seen on our brand before. They want higher ABV, they want natural colour. So it's something worth looking at. And I say this still wholeheartedly standing by my original review of the new Fettercairn 12, which was quite disappointing, but some of their other whiskies in the range have changed my mind on that. But in regards to this is delicious. It's really fun. It's a little bit unusual. And I think it's nice to showcase a brand which isn't a heavily sherried Bunnahabhain, which is quite normal. Good, but normal. Or a single barrel Glendronach, which is always exciting, but relatively normal. Or, you know, whatever weird casks Ardbeg find from Alaska in the next couple of years. Score-wise, I'm going to give that an 8.5. The nose is what I want in a whiskey. It reminds me a lot of older Japanese whiskey, specifically Hakshu 18 and 25. The taste, the contrast from like light and alluring to like, here's loads of spice, here's loads of pepper, here's licorice and some like really unusual kind of, not tobacco, but just sounding like licorice, slightly sagey, a little bit more savoury. It's got a beautiful contrast to it, because if it was just sweet, it'd be a bit boring. But no, thank you for John for letting me open this. Hopefully you see it. Hopefully you see this review. If you do find yourselves in Manchester, this will be in the shop. It will be available to try, and it'd be interesting to get your thoughts on it. Yeah, this turned into quite a long video. Sorry about that. Had a lot to say about this this distillery and other distilleries around it. But thank you all for watching. This is the Loch Fyne Fynest Fettercairn 24-year-old. 8.5 out of 10. Hopefully some of you get to try it and tell me what you think too. But I'm Phil. That's Thelma snoring in the corner. And I will see you all next week. Cheers.